welcome back. Parsha preview. Hey, welcome. You brought us goodies?
Yeah.
Nice. Sterns. Okay, not just any goodies. Stern goodies. Okay, so there's I want to try to, I know I'm usually like all over the place, so I want to continue with that method, but also kind of be a little bit organized. So I wanted to talk about, I'll lay it out like this. So I didn't look, I was trying to look up the numbers. I couldn't get it in time because I looked it up while I was driving here, and Siri said I could answer you when you stopped driving. So I didn't get my exact information, but I think we all know there's an industry today which has been around for thousands of years, but today it seems like it's more prevalent, and that's the industry of like perfume and cologne, and not just that's worn by the human, but even just in the home, right? Domani home, and like there's so many. There's not just sections in stores. There's entire stores, right? Bed Bath and Beyond. Like there's entire stores dedicated towards fragrances. It's an interesting sugya, and we're Yidden, so we do believe that there's hashgacha at play, even when it comes to like these worldly types of movements and cultures. And it's interesting that as we get closer and closer towards Geula, there's this focus and like a push towards smell. It's an interesting thing. Okay, but before that, just a brief overview. So Parshas Tetzaveh has 101 psukim. 101, the Vilna Gaon points out, is the hidden letters of Moshe's name. So the hidden letters of a name are as follows. So, for example, Moshe's name is Mem, Shin, He. The hidden letters of Mem is the part of the Mem you can't see. So Mem is spelled out in full in Hebrew, Mem, Mem. So the hidden letter of Mem is Mem. Shin is spelled out Shin, Yud, Nun, Shin. Right? So the hidden letters of Shin is Yud, Nun. And the hidden letters of He, although there's different ways to spell He, in the Graz calculation, it's a Aleph. Hey, Aleph. So the hidden letters of Moshe is Mem, Yud, Nun, Aleph, which is a numerical value, gematria of 101. Hey, Mo. 101. So it's interesting, even though Moshe Rabbeinu's name is not mentioned at all in Parshas Tetzaveh, his name, Big Beremez, is alluded to. Now, why is his name not mentioned in the Parsha? So, who is it? Ben Ishchai? I don't remember. Somebody says a fascinating thing. Moshe Rabbeinu, you have to be very careful with the words that you say. Moshe Rabbeinu said, oh, Hashem, right? Mecheni no misifrecha, erase me from your sefer. Now, Moshe wasn't actually erased from the sefer, even though he was willing, right? The Jewish people sinned by the Egel, and Hashem said, hey, let's start a new people, right? And Moshe said, no, if you're going to do that, mecheni no misifrecha, erase me, eradicate me from your sefer. So even though Moshe was still the leader and the Jewish people were saved, still his words came to fruition. How so? Because misifrecha can be rearranged to spell misefer chaf, from the 20th book. If you count from Bereshis, the 20th book is Parshas Tetzaveh. So that's what it means. Mecheni no misifrecha, erase me from your sefer. It actually came to fruition. His name was erased from the 20th book, which is our Parsha, Parshas Tetzaveh. Just the power of the words, which is a powerful idea. Okay, so the Parsha begins with, there are 7 mitzvos in this Parsha, and the Parsha begins with the discussion about the Shemen Zayis Zach, that the oil for the menorah couldn't just be any, I assume you can't even go, like Tuscanini, you know the Tuscanini? Tuscanini makes everything these days. You have to use the purest of the pure, as much as it could say pure, you have to use the purest of the pure. Rashi says, Bali Shemarim, without any sediments, right? And then the Torah digresses after it talks about what's used for the menorah. It talks about the big day kahuna. It talks about the priestly begadim, which is interesting. Who is it? Rabbi Yonason Eibshitz points out that when the Kohen was anointed, so the Kohen was anointed with a special oil, and the oil was so powerful it actually caused them to grow. Right? It caused that the actual Kohanim would grow when they were anointed. They would grow. It actually had.
The hair would grow. They would grow.
They would grow. I'm assuming if they would grow, their hair would grow also. I mean, yeah, they would grow. Then the question is, before they became anointed, they put on the Kohanic garbs that way to try it on. So it becomes a shaila. If when they actually were anointed, they would grow. So that means when they had already tried it on the garments beforehand, they would now be the wrong size, right? Because they tried it on before they grew. So what happened? So Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz says a miracle happened. And that is once the Kohen grew, the clothing also grew. The clothing grew with the Kohen. And the Rabbi Yonasan, say it again?
Like Shmuel.
Like, what happened to Shmuel?
I think his mother gave him some kind of clothing or something.
It grew with it? Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, I should learn nothing more. Thanks for the chizuk. Thanks for the mussar. But there is a lesson in that. Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz doesn't really go here, but I'm just pointing that out. We see this idea that when the person grows, the clothing grows with him. It's this concept, like the Sos Sharman, where the Ramchal points out, is that a person's supposed to live a life in this world where we're misala the world around you, right? Where it's not just that a person's like in a isolated nutshell, but that when he does something positive, when he introduces light, when he does a mitzvah, etc., when he learns Torah, when he says something nice, positivity. So he's not just impacting himself; he's actually elevating the world around him. So it's an imagery that we see from our Parsha, where the Kohen would be anointed, he would grow, and the clothing around him would grow as well. The idea of uplifting the physical that surrounds us. Okay, so. I want to focus on one specific point. I think it's an idea that is pretty prevalent in the Hasidic Torah that's talked about a lot today, and that's the first two words of Rashi. So Rashi tells us, "V'ata Tetzaveh, you shall command." I want to get back to that question also. You shall command. It's the Mefarshim point out it's a little bit redundant. It's unnecessary, right? To say you shall command. Just Hashem should have said Tetzaveh, command. But what does that mean? You shall command. Like, why do you have to add the word you? If Hashem says to Moshe, if he's talking to him point blank, right, and says command them, you don't have to say you shall command them. What's the addition of you?
He gets the Parsha that way. You.
Say it again.
He got another way of getting in the Parsha, but you.
Right. Okay, right. It's a way to get in, but without even saying his name. Okay, but we'll try to get to that. And another question I want to try to get back to is from the Regina. It's not a question, but the Regina Rebbe says that Yom Kippurim, that means Yom Kippur is like Purim, which means that in a certain realm, Purim is even greater than Yom Kippur, right? How is Purim greater than Yom Kippurim? So the Regina Rebbe says that because whereas Yom Kippur is mechaper only for shavim, only for those who are actually willing to return, Purim is different. It's mechaper for shavim and einam shavim. It's mechaper for those who are returning and those who are not even returning. So I kind of want to get to that. Like, what does that mean? Purim is mechaper for those who are returning and not returning. Like, that sounds pretty amazing. What does that mean? Mechaper means to atone. So Yom Kippur atones for those who are willing to return, and Purim atones for those who are even willing not to return, or unwilling to return.
Rely on that.
Can we rely on that? I don't know. Don't rely on me saying it. You can look up the Regina. He says it inside, and if you want to rely on that, I think it's pretty legit. So the first Rashi says zach, right? What does that mean? Olive oil, shemen zayis, that it should be zach pure. Kus is like battered down, crushed. Rashi says bali shemarim, without any sediments. It has to get to a point where there's absolutely no sediments. There's nothing. There's no psoles. There's nothing. No additives. Nothing. It's just completely pure. Bali shemarim. And if we find this by the ner, by the shemen in the menorah, then it's true by internally as well, right? Because, and you don't have to go that far. You look in the pasuk in Mishlei. The pasuk says, "Ner Hashem nishmas Adam," right? That the soul of man, ner. Some of the commentaries point out ner is nishat nefesh and ruach, or however you want to say it, but ner represents the soul, the neshama. So if we find that the ner, the neshama, is called a ner, and we find here in Parshas Tetzaveh that Shem and Zayach, that when it came to the neros, right? If you want to be lahales ner tamid, you want to elevate the ner, you have to have pure oil, bli shemarim. So in a certain realm, we can apply the same thing to the ner Hashem nishmas Adam, that is us, that is our soul, and that is to say that that nair that we have is belit shemarim. It's without any sediments. It's pure at it's completely pure at its core. And this is the antidote to Haman, to Amalek, right? This week's Parsha is Tetzaveh, but we're going to learn Parshas Zachar. And what Amalek tried to do is, Amalek, Gematria 240, the same as Suffolk, the same as doubt. Suffolk is associated with darkness because, right, usually people feel, even if they're in the same size room, if it's dark, they feel claustrophobic, they feel constricted because they're in a state of darkness. The opposite of darkness, the opposite of Suffolk, the opposite of Amalek would be this, would be the Shemen Zayis Zach, would be the purity, the light of the menorah, the place of Bli Shemarim, the place where there are no sediments. Bli Shemarim means there are no doubts, right? Suffolk means Shemarim, means sediments. There doubts, cloudiness, right? But the opposite of that is this, is the menorah, is the Zach. I was thinking, I don't think I shared it here before, but in Parshas Lech Lecha, so before Amalek even was a thought, before they even existed, the Torah tells us, it calls the place, a field of the Amalekites. It says, stay Amaleki. That's what the Torah tells us in Parshas Lech Lecha. And Rashi over there says something really interesting. Rashi says, Amalek doesn't exist. What's going on? So Rashi says, Adayin lo nolad Amalek. Amalek was not born yet. V'nikra Shem ha'asid, but it's still called Stay ha'amaleki, the field of the Amalekites. Al Shem ha'asid. In the future, there will be a people called Amalek. So it's called by the name of the future, by the name in the future. What's going to happen then? So Rashi doesn't just explain Pshat in the Psukim, but I forgot who says it, maybe one of the Chabad rabbis, I think, that one of the ways to get your Shemayim is by learning Rashi. What's Pshat? Rashi doesn't just explain Pshat in the Torah, he explains Pshat in ourselves, in our lives. Rashi's like one of the biggest Bali Musar that's out there. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe in particular was known to read through Rashi's. Rabbi Nachman a lot goes through Rashi's. Rashi, there's so much in Rashi, so I was thinking, let's learn something from this Rashi. And the Rashi on Sadeh HaAmaleki, the field of Amalek, Rashi says, Adayin lo nolad Amalek, Amalek was no longer born. I think what it's saying is something much deeper. That word Adayin means still, right? Rabbi Nachman uses this a lot, and Rabbi Nassan, Lakutei Halachos, in the very beginning, when he's explaining the first mitzvah of Yiskaber Kari, to wake up like a lion, he's talking about this idea that every person has to find within themselves a Nekuda Tova, and there's no Yid who doesn't have aspects of goodness. There's always a place, he calls it, it's called Adayin. It's a place of Adayin. Adayin means still. It means like, yeah, you did this wrong, but Adayin, still, there's still an aspect of goodness. Meaning if you search hard and far and deep enough, you will find that there exists a place of Bli Shemarim. It does exist a place that Amalek, and that's why I want to read into this, that Adayin lo nolad Amalek. As much as Amalek attacks, and as much as we read Parshas, and as much as Amalek has this influence of attacking the weaker ones, of causing darkness, of confusion, of confounding us, of making us be so busy with, as much as he does that, there's a place that exists inside of us where Adayin lo nolad Amalek. There's a place that exists inside of every Yid where Amalek is not yet born. And that's the part of us that when we read Parsha Zachar, perhaps we're trying to get back to. And this is meaning the antidote to fighting Amalek is to realize that, correct, as much as you have an influence in my life, as much as you tell me I'm bad or X, Y, and Z, there's a part of me that knows that you actually don't exist. So that's the part when we connecting to that ner, right? When we're connecting to that place of the zach, that place of clarity, that place of purity, that place of Bli Shemarim, where Suffolk doesn't exist, that's the place of Adayin lo nolad Amalek. And I think even as a practical idea, when we hear Parsha Zachar, we could think about this Rashi and Lech Lecha on Tzadei HaMaleki, the place of the future. That in that place, Amalek doesn't even exist. He wasn't even born yet. So I think that's an important idea. This kind of answers the question we asked of V'ata Tetzaveh, you, right? What does it mean in you shall command? Because it's very easy for Yiddishkeit to become check boxes, right? Where you do what you need to do. You go out to your job, parnasa, check, and you said this positive thing to a spouse, check, and you had this good talk with your kid, check, and right, daven shachris, check. I miss mincha. Okay, let's mark that. Okay. Minute mar, check. It went to Thursday night Parsha shir, check. Right, that's two checks, right? It's very easy but a person can live like that without the element of ata, without the element of you. I mean, a person can dot his I's and cross the T's and check off the boxes without actually being there, without actually being involved. And what the Torah is giving us a chizuk is that it's not just pshat that just do stuff, it's that you have to do it. The element of the ata has to be there, the element of you, that part of you that has that deep ratzon, that part of you that's good, that part, like connect to that part of yourself and then do it. Because then when you actually do those stuff, when you check off the boxes, it's not just going to be a check off, it's going to be an explosion, right? It's going to be an extremely, you're going to reap the reward so much more and so much better. Again, this is like an ideal. It doesn't always happen like that, and it's not always fun and games in that regard. But the idea is v'ata tetzaveh. It's not just a shot that you have to command, meaning you have to be involved in your Torah, in your mitzvahs, in your avodas Hashem. That's that idea. So I mentioned this idea of smells, that there's this industry today of just perfume and cologne and home scents, and it's such an interesting thing as we get closer and closer to the Gula. And if there's one yontif that is representative of reach, right, smells, it would be Purim, right? Purim chayev inish livisume beporaya, right? How do you translate the word livisume? Visume, right? So we translate it as like you have to get intoxicated, right? But livisume also means, and this is, I'm not making this up, this has been pointed out by some of the Mefarshim, levasume is milashon like bosem. Bosem is a fragrance. And not only that, but you find the allusion to Mordechai in the Torah is mariadachia, which is one of the spices, right? Esther is called hadassah, which is myrtle, right? Charvona also. And you keep finding this, right? Chayvinish levasume, part, right, and then you have more Mordechai, the main characters, the main good characters, Mordechai and Esther. They're all illusion. They all have an illusion with and some connection with spices, good fragrance, something smelling good. I think part of Achashverosh's when he was getting the women ready, right? One of the details in the Megillah that they would smell good. There seems to be this focus. You beat me to it. You saw my notes? You must have saw my notes. Okay. Yeah, very much so. That's why I want to get to that. So what's going on here? If we channel to the end of the Parsha, right? After the Shemin Zayisach, after the Big Day Kahuna, at the end of the Parsha, the beginning of the 30th chapter, right? So we talk about the Mizbeach. It's interesting. Most of the vessels have a single name. A menorah is called the menorah. Maybe in English you'd call it a tabernacle, but you'd still call that one name. It's the menorah. When it comes to the Mizbeach, the incense altar, it has three names. It's the Mizbeach HaKetares, the Mizbeach HaZahav, the golden altar, and it's called the Mizbeach HaPnimi, the inner one. It's an interesting thing. It's given an abundance of names. Not only that, but the classic question that the Mefarshim ask is, this vessel is different than every other vessel. First of all, why is it different? Why is it written and recorded in the Torah at the very end of Parshas Tetzaveh? It should be in last week's Parsha. In Truma, when we went through all of the stuff, we went through all of the outside, all of the vessels, all of the kelim. But here, at the end of our Parsha, it's like seems that the Torah is deliberately putting it off to the side, not necessarily in a negative way, but on the opposite. It's putting it like at the end, right? Because think about next week. Next week, Kisisa, and then Vayakal Bakude, then it's going to start to come to fruition. But like this is where it's at. So in last week's Parsha, Truma, we go through all the vessels, all except for one. Then we go through the Kohanic garbs, the people, right? And then at the very end, Shtubs it in. Oh yeah, the Mizbeach Hazav, and it has three names: the golden one, the incense one. But it's interesting. It's that this one is put on the pedestal, the incense altar, the Ketairos. What's so special about the Ketairos? First of all, it was positioned between the Shulchan and the Menorah. Right, it was next to in between the Shulchan and the Menorah, placed a little bit in front. That was where this incense altar, in contrast to the other altar, right, the Mizbeach HaChitzon, where or the copper one also, where there were animals that were brought. This was incense. It was one of the most holy parts of davening, which unfortunately sometimes we don't have time to say, but is Ketairos, the Parsha of Ketairos. One of the big avodas of Yom Kippur was Ketairos, right? We know one of the fragrances of Ketairos was Lavono, a bad smelling spice, which is included in, which Chazal tells us is even the Poshe Yisrael, even the sinners, because even them, they're part of this. Ultimately, even though there's that one element that's a bad smell, but when it's all placed together, it smells taka good. So what's going on with this Mizbeach HaKetairos? So the Rambam in Moira Hanavuchim, the third Chelak, section 45, he says something actually very practical. V'kevan shahamakoim hamikudash, because the holy temple or the Mishkan, whatever it was a slaughterhouse. If you've ever been to a slaughterhouse, it stinks, right? It smells terrible. There were things were slaughtered every day. People think, but meat was cut up, and it was the innards of the animals that were taken out. I mean, this was who would want to step foot in such a place? So what the Mizbeach HaKetairos, the incense altar, the golden altar, the inner altar, what that did was that it actually, well, I don't know how you say it, wafted away. It pushed away all of the bad smelling odors that existed, and it made the place smell divine. It made it smell so holy. So it served, according to the Rambam, it was a very practical function. It was a way that you could now enter into this place, right? But however practical it is, it's that much more spiritual, I think, what we learned from this Rambam, right? And that is what the Ketairos did is that it made the Beis HaMikdash, it made the Mishkan, it made the Makom, the holy resting place of Hashem's glory. It made that place a place that you can now tolerate and appreciate. And now you could, because if something smells bad, you can't appreciate anything else that's going on right now, right? But now that you have this good smelling spices, or right, this good smelling fragrance that's taking place, now you could appreciate the shulchan. Now you could appreciate the nar. Now you could appreciate the copper this, and you could appreciate, oh, these other kind. Good morning, how are you? If there's a bad smell, like you're not focusing on anything else. So, however practical it is, it's actually very spiritual. It's a very spiritual avodah because it's actually helping everything else fall into place. And the Torah puts it at the very end because there's something about the reach. There's some, in fact, we know, but the whole avodah, the purpose of all other karbanos, right? Time and time again, what does the Torah tell us about the karbanos? L'reach nichayach. Right? Ultimately, that's the goal, is that it should get to that point of reach nichayach. So this is the goal. That's why it's at the end. The goal is to get to a point of reach nichayach, of good smellingness, of positive fragrance, because that's going to set the tone. But not only that, I forgot who points this out. Somebody points this out, that when it came to the sin of Adam Harishon, the only sense that didn't sin was the sense of smell, the touch and the eyes and the teeth, mouth, and right. Every sense, right? We have 5 senses. Some say 6 is the sixth sense. Every single sense sinned, but our commentators point out there was one that didn't, and that was the sense of smell. There was no issue with that. And therefore, for the rest of time, the sense of smell becomes this spiritual entity, this spiritual connection that represents our divine connection. That's the Reach Nichayach. That's the Mizbeach HaKetairos. It's put at the end because this is the goal, right? Like the Rambam says, it took away all the other bad-smelling aromas that existed in the Mikdash, and now it smells good. Now it smells positive. Purim it's all about connecting to this. Mordechai is a smell. Mardachia, Esther, Hadassah, right? It's all about connecting to this point. There's a part of us that actually that smells good, right? There's a part of us, that's the part of us that's bli shemarim. That's the part where there are no sediments. That's the part where adayin loy noilad Amalek, where Amalek was not born yet. He doesn't exist in that place. In that place, we smell divine. We smell good. And it's interesting that in our generation, there is this tremendous focus on good smells. And because, again, it could be, the closer we get towards Geula, there's this focus that people are trying to connect to that inner positivity, that inner light, that inner sense where deep down there's a part of me that smells good, that taka is good. And I don't have my phone number. Do you have the time? I wanted to share one. 46. Okay, so we'll start. Oh, show me. Can I just share one quick story that happened this week? Okay, I will do mine. So it's kind of related, but I mean, most of us are either from Baltimore or familiar with Baltimore, so we know David Shoes. It's like it's not the Makam Mikdash, but I mean, it's a great. So there's this fellow, non-Jewish. He's a security guard actually in one of the schools here. And one of the shuls. So he's involved in a lot of Jewish life here. And I saw him at David Shoes the other day, and I'm like, okay, he must be converting or something like that. I'm like, what's going on? He's going to David Shoes, a non-Jew. So I asked him, because I saw him after. I asked him, he's like, yeah, I love meat dumplings. And somebody told me about David Shoes. I'm like, I got to try it out. Problem is, David Shoes, their dumplings aren't meat, they're chicken. So he said, okay, I'm not going to go for the chicken dumplings, but sesame chicken, like you can't go wrong with that. So he went for sesame chicken, and he fell in love with David Shoes sesame chicken. And he doesn't get a lunch special, which is like $14. He gets the extra large, which is like $24. He says he gets it like twice a week. I asked him if it comes with vegetables. He says he doesn't even know. He eats the sesame chicken with the rice. He was explaining to me how he eats it. First he eats the sesame chicken, then some of the rice, and then when he finishes the chicken, he mixes the sauce with the rice, and he eats that. And then I asked him a very important question. I'm like, what about the fortune cookie? Do you eat that? And he looked at me, and this happened on Tuesday. It happened like 2 days ago. I'm like, what about the fortune cookie? He's like, fortune cookie? He's like, what fortune cookie? I'm like, they always put a fortune cookie in the bag. He's like, to be honest with you, I'm so focused on that sesame chicken, I never looked that deep in the bag. He said, I never looked that deep in the bag. I never found the fortune cookie. I was thinking the Paleo says that every conversation we have, you could get his soros. And the soros I got was that, some people are involved in the sesame chicken, but deep down, if you look deeper in that bag, there's a fortune. And the Yidden are able to look deeper. We realize that deep down, there's a part of us that's bli shemarim. There's no sediments. There's a part of us that's pure. And in Ritz Hashem, we should all be zoichet to connect to that part.